Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell stood at attention, her spine rigid as steel as Colonel William Billy Mitchell paced before the line of elite trainees. The morning sun beat down on the Special Operations Training Facility in Virginia, turning the air thick with humidity. 26 candidates remained from the original 63, and Sarah was the only woman among them. Pathetic, Colonel Mitchell muttered as he reviewed her marksmanship scores from yesterday's qualification. Lieutenant Mitchell, your strategic assessments are impressive, but they mean nothing if you can't hit what you're aiming at. Sarah kept her gaze fixed forward, refusing to let the sting of his words show on her face. She had graduated top of her class at West Point, completed Ranger School with honors, and outlasted most of the men in this program. But the standard issue weapons felt unwieldy in her hands, throwing off her balance just enough to place her shots outside the acceptable range. "Sir, I'll improve, sir," she responded, voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. The colonel's eyes narrowed. "See that you do. One more failed qualification and you're out." As the group dispersed for morning drills, Sarah caught snippets of conversation from her fellow trainees. How'd she even make it this far? Probably some diversity quota. Just a matter of time before she washes out. Sarah had heard it all before. The whispers followed her through every phase of her military career, but never had the stakes been so high. This program represented the pinnacle of special operations training, and she'd sacrificed everything to get here. At the firing range, Commander Edward Butch O'Hare observed from a distance. Unlike Colonel Mitchell, the legendary SEAL commander watched with quiet intensity, his weathered face revealing nothing as Sarah struggled with her weapon. The M4 carbine felt slightly off balance in her grip, causing her shots to consistently drift right of center mass. "Time!" shouted the range instructor. "Results! Mitchell, 68%. Failing score. Again." Sarah's heart sank as she cleared her weapon. 3 failed qualifications in a row. One more and she'd be removed from the program, her dreams of joining this elite unit shattered. That evening, as she disassembled and cleaned her weapon for the 100th time, trying to understand what she was doing wrong, a shadow fell across her workbench. "Lieutenant Mitchell." Commander O'Hare's voice was quiet, but carried the weight of authority earned through decades of service. "Sir." She jumped to attention. "At ease." He studied her for a moment. "I've been watching you. Your problem isn't technique or effort." "Sir, I don't understand." "Sometimes," he continued, "the standard issue isn't standard for everyone." He reached into his holster and removed his sidearm, a weathered M1911 that looked like it had seen more combat than most soldiers. This belonged to Lieutenant Audie Murphy before it came to me. He placed the weapon on the table. "Tomorrow morning, 0500. Meet me at the private range before qualification." "Sir, I don't understand." "Sometimes the weapon chooses the warrior, Mitchell, not the other way around." His eyes held hers. One last chance to prove Colonel Mitchell wrong. As Commander O'Hare walked away, Sarah stared at the legendary weapon. Tomorrow's qualification would determine everything. Her career, her future, her chance to prove that she belonged. Outside, thunder rumbled across the Virginia mountains. A storm was coming, both literally and figuratively. Intelligence reports had warned of potential terrorist activity in the region, but no one expected the training facility itself might become a target. As Sarah studied the commander's weapon, she had no way of knowing that within 24 hours, she would be using it not just to pass a test, but to fight for her life and the lives of everyone at the facility. At 0500, Sarah stood alone on the private range, the weight of Commander O'Hare's M1911 unfamiliar, yet somehow right in her hands. The morning air was thick with fog as she waited, wondering if the commander had changed his mind. "Begin with your stance," Commander O'Hare's voice materialized from the mist. He approached, observing her grip. "That weapon has history. It's seen more combat than most soldiers ever will." For the next hour, he guided her through adjustments so subtle she'd never considered them. The pistol's balance matched her natural stance perfectly, unlike the standard issue weapons that had been designed for larger hands and different centers of gravity. "Last round," he said as she emptied the magazine into the target. When they checked the results, Sarah couldn't believe her eyes. Perfect grouping, center mass. "Sir, this is what you're capable of with the right tool," he finished. "Now prove it at qualification." 2 hours later, Colonel Mitchell's face contorted in disbelief as Sarah scored 98% with Commander O'Hare's weapon. "Unorthodox," he muttered, but couldn't argue with the results. The victory was short-lived. As the trainees moved to tactical drills, the facility's alarms blared. This wasn't scheduled. Commander O'Hare's radio crackled with urgent reports. Armed hostiles had breached a perimeter, communications were being jammed, and the main building was under attack. "This is not a drill," Colonel Mitchell shouted as gunfire erupted from the direction of the command center. "Hostiles on site, defensive positions." Chaos erupted as trainees scrambled for cover. Sarah instinctively checked the M1911, only half a magazine left from qualification. A trainee next to her took a hit and went down hard. She dragged them behind the concrete barrier, applying pressure to his bleeding shoulder. "Mitchell," Colonel Mitchell called out, "we need to reach the armory. Command center's compromised." "Sir, the quickest route is through the east corridor, but it's exposed." "We have no choice," he insisted. "There's another way," Sarah countered. "The maintenance tunnels. They're not on the main facility plans." Colonel Mitchell hesitated, clearly torn between dismissing her suggestion and acknowledging the merit of her alternative. "How do you know about these tunnels, Lieutenant Mitchell?" "I studied the original blueprints in the archives, sir, before they were updated." A nearby explosion rocked the ground, deciding for him. "Lead the way, Mitchell." Sarah guided a small team of 5 through the narrow maintenance tunnels, the commander's pistol drawn. The darkness was almost complete, broken only by their tactical lights. Water dripped from pipes overhead as they navigated the labyrinth beneath the facility. "Stop," Sarah whispered, raising her fist. Ahead, voices echoed. Hostile forces had found the tunnels too. She signaled silently, positioning her team for an ambush. 3 armed men rounded the corner, wearing unmarked tactical gear. Sarah took aim with the M1911, remembering Commander O'Hare's guidance. 3 shots, 3 hits. The hostiles dropped before they could return fire. "Impressive," Colonel Mitchell whispered, newfound respect in his voice. They reached the junction leading to the armory when the worst happened. Commander O'Hare's radio came through on a captured radio. He'd been taken hostage in the command center. "We have your commander," an accented voice announced. "Surrender your weapons and codes or he dies in 30 minutes. Colonel Mitchell's face hardened. "We can't give up those codes. The classified information in our systems would compromise operations worldwide." Sarah checked the M1911. 3 rounds left. The team looked to Colonel Mitchell for orders, but his eyes shifted to her. "Lieutenant Mitchell," his tone transformed from the dismissive superior who had called her pathetic just yesterday. "What's your assessment?" Sarah felt the weight of the legendary weapon in her hand and the heavier weight of the decision before her. Commander O'Hare believed in her when no one else did. Now his life and potentially the security of countless operations hung in the balance. "Sir," Sarah said, formulating a plan that seemed impossible, "I think I can reach the command center through the ventilation system, but I'll need a diversion." Sarah crawled through the narrow ventilation shaft, dust coating her uniform as she inched forward with Commander O'Hare's M1911 clutched in her right hand. 3 rounds left. The metal creaked beneath her weight and she froze, listening for any reaction from the hostiles below. Nothing. She continued forward, guided by the facility blueprints she'd memorized during those late nights when others thought she was just compensating for her pathetic marksmanship. Through a vent grate, she spotted Commander O'Hare zip-tied to a chair in the command center, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. 4 armed men surrounded him, while their leader, a tall figure with a jagged scar across his cheek, paced impatiently. "Your people have 15 minutes before I put a bullet in your head," the leader snarled at O'Hare. The commander's eyes remained defiant. "They won't sacrifice national security for one man. You've wasted your time." Sarah's earpiece crackled softly. "Diversion in 3 minutes," Colonel Mitchell whispered. "Make it count, Mitchell." She positioned herself above the room's rear corner, carefully removing the vent cover. Below, the hostiles were focused on the main entrance, expecting the attack to come from there. Sarah took a deep breath, remembering Commander O'Hare's words. Sometimes the weapon chooses the warrior. The explosion rocked the east wing of the facility. Alarms blared as the hostiles tensed, 3 of them moving toward the door on their leader's command. "Check it out," he ordered, keeping his weapon trained on O'Hare. The moment they left, Sarah dropped silently from the vent, landing in a crouch behind the console. The leader's back was to her, his attention divided between his hostage and the commotion outside. She raised the M1911, steadied her breathing, and squeezed the trigger. One shot. The leader's weapon clattered to the floor as he clutched his shoulder, spinning around in shock. "Drop to your knees," Sarah commanded, weapon trained on his center mass. Instead, he lunged for his falling gun. Sarah fired again, her second shot striking his leg. He collapsed, cursing as she kicked his weapon away and secured him with his own zip ties. "Lieutenant," Commander O'Hare said with quiet pride as she cut him free, "I knew that weapon found its rightful owner." The door burst open. Sarah swung around, the M1911 raised with her final round ready, but it was Colonel Mitchell and the tactical team, securing the room. "Command center clear," Mitchell reported into his radio, then turned to Sarah. "Well done, Lieutenant." Within hours, the facility was secured. The attack had been orchestrated by a shadow organization targeting classified intelligence on U.S. Special Operations. 7 hostiles were killed, 4 captured, and 3 trainees wounded, but no fatalities among the American personnel. In the aftermath, Sarah stood at attention before Colonel Mitchell and Commander O'Hare in the debriefing room, still covered in dust and grime from the ventilation system. "Lieutenant Mitchell," Colonel Mitchell began, his tone formal but lacking his previous disdain. "Your actions today demonstrated exceptional tactical thinking, courage under fire, and precision marksmanship that saved lives, including Commander O'Hare's." He paused, looking uncomfortable with what came next. "I was wrong about you. Your approach to problems is unconventional but effective. The program needs soldiers who think differently." Commander O'Hare stepped forward, the bandage on his forehead stark against his tanned skin. He held out his hand, the M1911 resting in his palm. "This weapon has been passed down through generations of warriors who changed the way we fight. Lieutenant Audie Murphy carried it through some of the darkest days of World War II. It came to me in Afghanistan when my commanding officer fell. Now it's yours." Sarah accepted the weapon, feeling its weight, not just the physical heft, but the legacy it carried. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything, but do something for me. Someday, you'll meet another soldier who everyone has given up on, someone who doesn't fit the mold. When that day comes, remember this moment." 3 months later, Sarah Mitchell graduated at the top of her class from the Special Operations Program. As she stood receiving her insignia, she noticed a young female lieutenant in the next training cycle watching from a distance, with doubt and determination warring in her eyes, just like they had in Sarah's not long ago. That evening, Sarah approached the young officer on the firing range where she struggled with her qualification shots. Without a word, Sarah unholstered the M1911 and placed it on the bench between them. "Sometimes," she said, echoing the words that had changed her life, "the weapon chooses the warrior."